What's up guys, it's Asian here, and in this video we're just going to be discussing the future of Alkosh. So synergies were updated on the PTS to make them a little bit easier to use, but at the same time some of the changes that came with the synergy update kind of made a big impact on Alkosh, a classic tanking set. So, this video we're just kind of discuss what the future of Alkosh looks like right now, just based on the initial PTS changes. Now, we are only on the first week of the PTS, so there are 3 more iterations, 3 more patches that are going to come out, as well as the final patch, which is probably going to be at least a little bit different from the final PTS patch. So whatever we discuss today might change in the future, and if it does change in any sort of significant way, then yes, I will release an update video to kind of re-exploring the issue here. So the main issue right now is going to be revolving around Alkosh. So for those of you guys who don't know what Alkosh is, you guys aren't going to be able to see that actually, so I'll just do this. So Alkosh is a medium armor set that comes from Maw of Lorcage, so you do need to have access to the Thieves Guild DLC in order to get Alkosh. It is traditionally a tanking set, even though it is a medium armor set. We don't really care about the 2, 3, or 4 piece bonuses. Those are more geared for stamina DPS, but the big piece here is going to be the 5 piece. When you activate a synergy, you send a shockwave from your position that deals 21, in this case 2184 physical damage and an additional 110 physical damage over 10 seconds. Then it reduces the physical and spell resistance of any enemy hit by 2940 for 10 seconds. So that is the strength of Alkosh. It's the largest debuff in the game when you pair it with something like an infused crusher. So here it is. So here's an infused crusher enchant, so you get the 2108 from the crusher enchant on top of the, when you have all gold pieces, it's 3010, so that ends up being about a 5100 debuff on the enemy, which is the largest debuff you can get in a game. This does rely, of course, that the Alkosh debuff is up, so it only lasts for 10 seconds. And it also relies on the Crusher enchant being up. So that lasts for 5 seconds on a 5-second cooldown. So at most you're going to be looking at maybe like a 50% uptime on that 5000-ish debuff. But Alkosh still is the best debuff set for Magicka users, for Magicka DPS, because Magicka DPS actually don't have access to any sets that reduce spell resistance. And it is a nice boost to Stamina DPS as well. Even though Stamina DPS have access to more sets that reduce physical resistance, having that additional Alkosh debuff is a nice thing to do. Now the Alkosh set, as you can obviously read from the very first couple of words, only works when you have a synergy and when you activate a synergy. So that's kind of why a lot of groups, a lot of vet trials guilds have kind of shied away from Alkosh, because you do need to activate a synergy, which does kind of impact the uptime on Alkosh. So if you only have, for example, orbs or shards from a Templar healer, then you'll only ever be able to get a 50% uptime on Alkosh, because there's a 20-second cooldown. The proc lasts for 10 seconds, so do the math, that's 50% uptime. So if you have 2 or more synergies, different synergies, so if you have like a Max Orkin group, so using the Liquid Lightning, and then you have orbs from your healer or shards from your healer, you can in fact get 100% uptime on Alkosh if you time it correctly. That's kind of the most difficult part though, being able to time your synergies correctly. So a lot of groups have shied away from Alkosh because of the difficulty in getting a significant amount of uptime. Now, the alternative is going to be Torix Pact. So with an infused Torix Pact, it boosts your Crusher enchant even higher, so it deals 2740 debuff, physical and spell resistance debuff, for pretty much 100% of the time. So it's better than a normal infused Crusher, but it's not as good as Alkosh. But the upside is you can pretty much guarantee 100% uptime if you're using a Torix Pact infused Crusher enchant. Now, in order for Alkosh to beat Torix Infused Crusher, you need an uptime of about 24%. Anything above 24%, Alkosh ends up winning out in terms of average debuff that you see. So what most groups do is they take the 3010 from the Alkosh debuff, or whatever their tank is, so in my case 2940, then they multiply that by the average uptime for that particular boss, so let's say you got like 40% uptime, and then you add that to 2108, and that ends up being your effective resistance debuff that you get from using Alkosh. So a lot of groups, like I said, have been moving away from it because it's hard to get anything above 50% uptime on Alkosh, at least with one tank. With two tanks, it's a little bit easier to get 50% to 60% uptime on Alkosh, but it still requires some level of coordination, and it does require you to use a synergy still. And with the current way that synergies work, where only one person can ever see a synergy at a time, it's fairly difficult. I won't say impossible, but it is fairly difficult to get good uptime on Alkosh this way. So that's why a lot of groups are moving towards Taurugs. Now, if we take a look now at the patch notes, I gotta swap over real quick. So if we take a look at the patch notes here, we see here that they changed the synergy, so they removed it from the cooldown, so you don't have to wait 1 second between using an ability in order to use a synergy anymore, so you can just use an ability and use a synergy right away. So that's always nice. The other thing that is pretty important here, and just kind of the nail in Alkosh's coffin, so to speak, is that they increased the cooldown for each synergy to 30 seconds from 20 seconds. So on live right now, there's a 20-second cooldown between each synergy. So if you use Conduit on a Max Works Liquid Lightning, you have to wait 20 seconds before you can activate it again. With this latest update, it's bumped up to 30 seconds. So now if you only have orbs or shards from your healer as a tank who's running Alkosh, you only have a 33% uptime max on Alkosh. With two synergies, so let's say you have a Max Work with Conduit, your max uptime is going to be 66%, theoretical. You're going to need 3 different synergies in order to get 100% uptime on Alkosh with these changes. And that's going to be incredibly difficult to do. Just take, for instance, the number of synergies that you're going to be able to get from a typical raid team that's running 2 Templar healers. So you get orbs and shards, those share synergy. So activating an orb means you are on cooldown for the shard as well. So that's 1. If you're using Extended Ritual, you get the Purify synergy, that's 2. If you have a Max Working group, that's you have Liquid Lightning, that's 3. If you have Stam Decays, when they use their ultimate, you can use their Shackle synergy if they're using the Standard of Might ultimate, so that's 4. And that's pretty much it. That's it for synergies, really. No other classes have any sort of synergies that you can use. So you have 4 synergies in total on your average raid group. Obviously this is going to change depending on if, you know, a Templar uses a Nova or for whatever reason, or, you know, you're using some Bone Shield, or you have a healer using Blood Altar. But at least you're looking at 4 synergies, maybe 3. If you have a Warden healer, you have another additional synergy with Healing Seeds, so 5 if you have a Templar and Warden healer. But still, that's not a lot of synergies to play around with, so you kind of have to time it out, and it's just going to be very difficult, even more difficult now to get good Alkosh uptime. So remember that the Alkosh uptime in order to beat Taurug's Infused Crusher is 24%. So with a 33% uptime on Alkosh with just 1 synergy, it's gonna be pretty difficult to justify using Alkosh now when you could just use Taurugs instead and have that consistent debuff. Now that doesn't mean that Alkosh is worse than Taurugs. Obviously Alkosh is still going to be better than Taurugs, because as long as you get above 24% uptime, you're beating Taurugs. But it's going to be a lot more difficult now in order to get consistent high Alkosh uptimes. So I don't see Alkosh being used very often except for the very highly coordinated guilds from now on, maybe like Mechanically Challenged or Dragon's Crest or What Mechanics, for example. They might continue to use Alkosh instead of moving over to Taurug's Pact, but those guys are the 1% of the 1%ers. Those guys, if you watch any of their streams, if you watch their videos on YouTube, any of them on their main team, like Mapur, LZH, Fear Turbo, they work together like a well-oiled machine. They know each other very well. They've raided together for months, years even. So comparing your raid team to what Mechanically Challenged, Dragon's Crest, What Mechanics, what they can do, it's not an accurate comparison. So I am imagining that a lot of raid guilds are going to shift away from Alkosh and move instead to Torug's Pact instead, just for the consistency with the debuffs. It does mean, of course, that you're going to need to put more points into Spell Erosion as Magicka DPS or Piercing as Stamina DPS. But with the boost to CPs, it's not going to be that big of a deal. You can just put those 10 extra CPs into your respective passives in order to kind of make up for the penetration loss, but still at the same time, it kind of sucks because Alkosh was a good set. It was a good set. It still is a good set, at least for right now. But with these changes to synergies, it's pretty much going to be dead in the water. I don't see it being used except for the very high top end raiding guilds. So that's kind of the future of Alkosh. So if you are farming Alkosh now, I mean, I would still say do it because it's still better than Torug's. Just if you are going to farm it for your Vet Trials team, I kind of want to take into consideration that Torug's is going to be more consistent, and you're only going to lose about 500 to 600 penetration usually on average compared to using Alkosh. So you kind of gotta talk with your raid lead, figure out whether they want to use Alkosh or they want to shift towards Torug's or whatever you guys normally do for tanking sets. So that's it for this video. Hope you guys found it informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.